Hello, everyone. Welcome to Where Are All the Women? We're all here. Me, Mary Lou, the rest of you. Thank you for joining. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're watching on X, hello. Hello, Mary Lou. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. Getting some rain here, which is always really nice in the desert. Not having a big windstorm, that's also nice.
That is nice. How did your windstorm go, by the way?
We have a big branch down in our yard. It went okay. We get through it, but I'm glad it's not happening right now. That's freaky when it's windy like that.
Yeah, it's scary because you don't know if something's going to like crash through your roof or your window or something, right?
Right. The night of the windstorm, when everyone heard my building, the things on my roof blowing around, there on the way to Santa Fe on the interstate, there was a 23-car pileup from the dust being blown from the wind. There was zero visibility. Yeah, no one died. 19 people were hospitalized.
That's scary.
Yeah, it's really scary. So thankfully that's not happening right now.
I'm glad to hear that. We're getting a ton of rain here, which has been awesome because it cools things down a bit. And our storms have not started yet. I was going to knock on wood, but there's no point in doing that because they're going to come eventually. It's just they're just not here yet. That's mostly like August, September kind of stuff. And that's when the power starts going out and there's hurricanes looming and things like that. This year I'm planning to cheat a little bit and go back to BC during the worst of the storm season, which I feel guilty about because it's cheating. Like if you're a real local, you're supposed to stay through the summer. It doesn't really count if you don't. Although so many people here will say, oh yeah, I live here. And I'm like, oh, really? What? I didn't know that. And they're like, well, I'm here December through April. I'm like, okay, well.
Right.
You're on a long vacation then, hey?
Exactly.
But I mean, I obviously get it because the power outages are harsh because it's like everything goes out and it's hot and your AC doesn't work and your internet's down and your phone goes out and like you're just sitting around hot in the house and you don't know when it's going to end or when the power is going to come back on or anything. So yeah, I think I can escape for a little bit. But in any case, enough about the weather. How is everyone in the audience doing? Let us know in the live chat if you're watching on YouTube, if you have comments or questions as we go, not general random questions and comments. I mean, you can say whatever you want, obviously, but by questions, I mean in the context of what we're talking about. Hopefully, do your best. I feel like there was like 8 million things piling up to talk about this week. One of the funniest, I think, being that Pride in Toronto Pride, which happened on the weekend, was shut down by the Free Palestine people. And there was only like 20 of them. And they stopped the whole parade and then they canceled the parade to Free Palestine.
To Free Palestine. And is it because the marchers in the parade were sympathetic to the demands of the protesters and decided to just not have the parade? Or how did the thought process happen?
I think it was the cops that decided to just shut the whole thing down, or the city. Like, I don't think that it was the Pride people who were like, forgive us. We do need to free Palestine, and this is impeding the freeing of Palestine, so we'll stop. I think, yeah, the cops and the city just sort of caved to their demands or something. It wasn't violent. I mean, who knows what could have happened. It was more just annoying. They just stopped the parade and were shouting their slogans. They were all in masks, naturally, and they were saying things like Free Palestine and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They had like a big banner that said, that called to end pinkwashing.
Pinkwashing, what's that?
Well, I mean, I first heard of the term pinkwashing, I think, in reference to like breast cancer campaigns
Yes.
aimed at women. This was like, I don't know, 6 to 10 years ago. That was like a big thing. There would be all these like makeup products that you could buy for breast cancer, probably that also caused breast cancer.
Totally. Breast Cancer Industry Awareness Month.
Yeah, exactly. Don't forget to look at all of the chemicals that they're putting in your shampoo that they're now selling with a pink ribbon on it to contribute to research to end breast cancer that they caused. But I think, I think that pink washing was like in reference to sort of like feminizing or, distracting from the actual causes of things like breast cancer. But in this context, I think what they mean is like that maybe I think they're implying that pride is like ignoring the queers in Palestine who also need to be freed. Of course, not realizing that what they need to be freed from is Palestine, because you're not allowed to be queer over there in Gaza under Hamas.
I've been so busy being horrified about the presidential debate and thinking about other things. So did Palestine get freed with the queers stopping the parade?
I don't think that they did just yet. I don't think that ending the Pride Parade freed them. The videos were very funny though, because in one video there was like, it's always hard to tell who's who, because like one of the main Free Palestine people stopping the parade was this like large purple-haired woman who looked like she should be part of the Pride Parade. They all sort of look like they should be part of the Pride Parade, sort of like skinny and sickly and strange looking. But she was angry. She was angry that Amazon and Google were there at the Pride Parade. I don't know if she meant they were sponsoring or what. She was reading all of this off of her iPhone, by the way. All of these corporate complaints. I mean, I have corporate complaints and I use an iPhone too, but the visuals of that I found amusing. And yeah, I just it's funny to see it's amusing to watch the two parties clash, because they're sort of one and the same as far as I'm concerned. I almost like forgot about the debate when I was first thinking about, I was taking notes about what we can cover this week. I was like, oh, I guess the debate, duh. But I also feel like so many other people covered it that I don't know if I have anything new to say, but maybe you do.
Well, I wish I hadn't watched it.
I didn't watch it. I watched clips after the fact and read about it and listened to it, but I didn't bother even trying to watch it.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. I think my mouth was hanging open as much as Biden's was the entire time, just realizing just how bad our situation is in the United States. Advertising to the enemies of America that we have no leadership right now. Demented man, president. It's so demoralizing that our choices are this man who he's a career politician with his background is just as shady and troublesome as any career politician. That's Biden, versus this overt con man who, people love a good con. There's a sucker born every minute, but that, watching that be our options was very sad to me. I'm an RFK gal, it solidified my desire to vote for RFK, but I know he has no chance of being the president. They wouldn't allow him in the debates. He did a simultaneous, it was called the Real Debate, where he answered all the questions that were being asked of these two guys who weren't answering the questions. It was terrible. It was really terrible. And I miss the facade. I miss the old illusionary game that we have competent leadership and you have to be a statesman to get this position. I think
respectable or qualified in some way, cognizant of what's going on around you.
One thing that I found,
conscience.
One thing I found interesting though was my perception of Trump for years has been that he has a hard time controlling his impulses and that he can't stop talking over people. And I have to say, I was very impressed at his skill of restraining himself and letting Biden just ramble and ramble and ramble. He basically let Biden just hang himself and exhibit to the world that he has, very advanced dementia.
He did seem pretty calm, right? Like, I feel like in past years, the first time around when he was debating Hillary, when I thought he was horrid and that she deserved to win, and I was so upset when she lost, and I felt that she was treated so badly by him in the debate. But I mean, he just seemed like he was just being such an obnoxious bully throughout the debate, and this time around he did seem pretty like calm and composed, which, I mean, I guess, it's obviously a good strategy. Like you say, he didn't really need to do much. Biden was doing himself in all on his own.
Yeah, and I think the line of the debate that most people have recognized by now was when Biden just rambled a bunch of nonsense, and then they turned to Trump for his rebuttal, and he says, I don't know what he just said. I don't think he knows what he just said either. And it was what everyone was thinking. Yeah, it was amazing to me to watch Trump restrain himself. When I think back to the Hillary debates, I think Trump is a very astute con artist. I think that's what makes for a good businessman in many ways. Most of these guys who gain and lose millions and millions of dollars are, they're into the con. Like, they know what sells, they know what people want to buy. And it makes me think people wanted to see him looming over Hillary and following her around on the stage. It was horrifying to us. And I think it triggered women who have been stalked and who don't like big threatening guys. But there was so much hatred of Hillary Clinton. And I think that his behavior then was just as calculated, and it bought him votes.
Yeah, I think it worked, which I didn't realize or expect, because I was in that progressive bubble that we're all critical of now in retrospect. But yeah, I mean, these guys, I don't know. I've never really understood politicians before. I also don't really, frankly, understand businessmen and capitalists. I don't mean I don't understand the incentive. I just don't understand. I don't have the desire to do that, so I can't. Like, I'm not poor. I'm not poor necessarily intentionally, but it's also not by accident. Like, I just have no desire to try to sell something. It doesn't feel good to me. And I think people who are good at making money and make a lot of money are good at selling things, good at schmoozing. And to me, that means a certain level of lacking in authenticity and integrity, because you can't really just go around just being fully authentic and just, being yourself and being true to yourself and also selling a product or trying to climb within a certain industry, or in this case, within politics. Like, it's such a schmoozy thing. It just is. I mean, that, many people over the years have told me, oh, like, why don't you get into politics? I'm like, I have no interest in living that life. I'm happy with my life. Of course, I would like to have more financial security and so on and so forth. But I think everybody, anyways, who's paid attention to me over the years probably knows how bad I am at selling things and doing things that I don't want to do, even if they would benefit me.
Telling people what they want to hear. That's not what you're going for. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to.
Politics.
Yeah, well, and then it's hard to respect any of them. And I do respect some of them. I just was reading Pierre Poilievre's biography because I was prepping for an interview with the author of the biography, Andrew Lawton. So he's the leader of the Conservative Party in Canada, and the Conservative Party has a very good chance of winning the next federal election, which would be great, because I think that's the only chance we have to address, certain problems as I see them, and many other problems that Canadians are bothered by, and, many of the reasons that people hate Justin Trudeau so much, including the gender identity stuff and the transing of kids stuff and the men and women's prisons and men and women's sports issue. That's a big one, of course, but also issues like, the carbon credits, carbon tax, immigration, things that Justin Trudeau only addresses in as far as he can tweet about them, right? Like he virtue signals about diversity and inclusion and, trans women are women, and we're so proud of our diverse country here in Canada while we're letting immigrants flood in, and that has a major impact on all sorts of things. But needless to say, when I began this was like, I like Pierre Poilievre, but it's hard to really trust somebody who's a career politician because they've worked in politics. He's been in politics for literally his whole adult life, since college. Right. And it's just something I don't totally relate to, because you can't really say what you think. Everything has to be kind of a strategic angle.
Right. Yeah, I could waver between thinking politics is important and judging myself for not just completely withdrawing from paying attention to it and participating in it. I'm fascinated by the sickness in my country of people who are so deranged by Trump that they will deny that Biden has dementia, or women who think Biden is doing great things for women when he just destroyed women's sex-based rights and education. Yeah, exactly.
I know that's weird. This thing where people keep insisting that Trump is this big threat to women and women's rights, and that we have to vote for Biden because Biden is like, if you care about women, you have to vote for Biden. And it's like, or, even further than that, if you care about women's rights, you have to vote for Biden, which, is so weird because he literally just destroyed women's rights. Like, what rights are you talking about? Presumably all they can think about is abortion. Exactly. But Trump is not anti-abortion, so that doesn't make much sense to me either.
I think Trump has pretended to be anti-abortion to win votes in the same way he did that outdoor press conference holding a Bible. Like, I don't think Trump is a religious man. If I had a way to prove it and get in with an odds maker and make the bet, I would bet that Trump has been involved in many abortions over the course of his life as a man. He's been blatantly pro-abortion in the past. Like, he's a con man. He's a con man turned politician. Potato. But things like, I was watching some of the really deranged Democrats watching the debate, and they were like, oh, Biden just said this zinger, look how sharp he is. Like, how can you see this? Like, this man, his face is drooping. I have worked as a nurse on a dementia unit in the past, and this man clearly has dementia. Anyone who's worked in gerontology in medicine knows that. But honestly, anyone who's had a family member with dementia, anyone who knows anything about people who don't age well and lose their cognitive abilities can see what's happening here, and that they're digging in and pretending it's not happening is very distressing. In some ways more distressing than the whole trans women are women thing, because this is literally like the leader of the world's largest nuclear power with the world's largest military arsenal. This is serious stuff. That this is the guy who can press the button. This is the guy who responds to diplomatic crises. It's pretty upsetting. And then as far as Trump goes, everyone's okay, abortion rights are already gone federally. We have lost the federal right to abortion. Trump has said again and again he's not interested in criminalizing abortion federally, which means in every state. So it's going to remain with the states. The loss of Roe versus Wade is on both parties. The Democrats have used that as the way to get female votes for my whole lifetime, or since I was 3 years old. They never chose to codify Roe versus Wade into federal law when they had the opportunity to do so. And I think that was calculated because then what would they run on?
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, this does win them elections over and over and
yeah,
over again because
yeah,
it's used as a fear-mongering
yeah.
tactic to keep women on board.
And criminalizing abortion on a state level has been horrible for women in those states. I'm not going to deny that, but it's already over. That's already over. We lost. The current Supreme Court has ruled, and now it's back to the states, which is exactly what the Republicans have said they wanted to do since versus Wade was first a ruling. They did what they said they were going to do. It's not surprising. This has been their goal. So that fight's gone. So that remains a state issue fight, like the women of Texas, the women of Idaho, the women in states that have these draconian laws where hospitals can't treat miscarriages ethically, need to fight on a state level now. So that's done. I read Project 2025. Everyone is really upset that Trump has said he's going to enact this sweeping reform of the United States if he's elected, and it's this document written by a lot of guys from the Heritage Foundation. They're very conservative, but I read it, and honestly, some of the stuff in there I agree with. Like, I actually think we should abolish the Department of Education. I don't think it's been a good experiment. People tend to believe, they don't know history, and they think we've always had this Department of Education in the United States that was enacted in Jimmy Carter's term, so the late 70s. That is how long we've had a Department of Education. Unquestionably, educational standards have declined since then. I don't think the federal government should be dictating national educational policy. I think that should be a state's issue. So, and I think, as someone concerned of abuse of corporate power, eliminating the Department of Education will eliminate the fact that every time a Republican's in office, capitalists like Betsy DeVos and the families that wanted to push through the charter schools can come into the Department of Education and privatize the Department of Education for their own financial benefit. I think it would actually be better for everyone to get rid of it. But everyone is just acting like Project 2025 is going to institute the Handmaid's Tale. There's, they do.
Why do they think that? I don't know anything about this.
It'd be interesting to read it. You can find the whole document online. It's a slog. I went to the Wolf Conference, and when was that? Was that in March? And it was mentioned there, and that was the first I'd heard of it. So it took me a while to get through to just read it section to section. And I decided I agreed with part of it, and parts of it I disagree with. Like, they have very conservative beliefs about the heterosexual nuclear family as the cornerstone of society, and they want to put in supports for that. I don't think they can do this at a federal level, but there's, ending no fault divorce, ending, recriminalizing abortion, but also supporting families with children and incentivizing two-parent heterosexual married families having children, which means not giving money to women who don't have a partner, which,
right.
Yeah. I mean,
well, divorce is the worst thing in the world, apparently now. Jen in the comments says, Trump hasn't endorsed Project 2025. It's just a wish list by the Heritage Foundation.
Oh, that's interesting. I would imagine that's, I believe he probably doesn't know much about it. He just wants to get back into power.
Oh, I see.
The Heritage Foundation had quite a bit of influence in the Trump administration. Roger Severino from the Heritage Foundation was the head of Health and Human Services. And, the first thing Trump did was overturn the Obama Title IX letter that said all schools in the United States had to recognize trans males that say they're women as women. So, and then when Roger Severino was in that cabinet position, he did a lot of things that were actually beneficial to women on that issue. Department of Housing and Urban Development, I think Ben Carson was the secretary there, and he reversed the HUD laws that if you took federal housing money, you had to believe that men who say they're women are women in all housing situations. So it ended female-only housing under HUD, and he reversed that. And so it's not as cut and dry as one is universally better for women than the other. Women are screwed either way, and less I can see how we benefit under Biden. Like, I really don't understand what Biden's doing for women that's beneficial for us.
I don't know, because I don't know the system in the US as well as you do. I mean, are there like maternity leave? Do women get any assistance in terms of daycare? I don't think these are necessarily great things, but I'm trying to think of arguments in favor of Biden that would extend beyond abortion as it's misunderstood.
We have no federal maternity leave. Under the Clinton administration, we got the Family Medical Leave Act, which says if you work for a business or corporation that has more than a certain number of employees, they have to give you time off if you have a baby, but it doesn't have to be paid. So we have no federal mandate for paid maternity leave. So no, we won't. Trump is not going to overturn the Family Medical Leave Act. We're not going to lose what we already have on that. There's no federally subsidized daycare.
What do people mean when they say that it's going to like usher in a Handmaid's Tale type situation with regard to Project 2025? It's funny because you hear that reference in all sorts of different contexts, some of which don't really make much sense to me. I tweeted and deleted a tweet last night because it was just not a suitable conversation for Twitter, because everybody that was responding was misunderstanding my views and lecturing my views back to me, essentially. I was like, oh no, I agree with you about that. I just don't like, and I kept doing that over and over. And I was like, okay, I'm just deleting this. This is going to drive me insane. This is not like a conversation for this platform. But I said, this is getting a little too Handmaid's Tale-y about this clip from Tim Pool. And like, I didn't watch the full conversation, so I'm sure there was a broader context to these quotes. But it started out in reference to Marine Le Pen winning the first round of elections in France. And of course, people are freaking out about that because it's a far right party, and the feminists are freaking out, and everyone is saying racism. But the clip that was referenced by the post millennial said, first he said, French people and American people aren't having enough kids. And then he said, if you want to maintain your country, your national identity, you've got to have babies. And another woman who was on the panel or whatever on his show said, you have to have someone to pass down your unique cultural traditions. And I mean, the reason that I tweeted this is getting a little too Handmaid's Tale-y for my liking was because you have to have babies. What I heard was, you women, this is maybe not literally what he meant. You women have to have babies for your country and to preserve your national identity. And like the idea of it makes sense. And I think that women should be encouraged to have babies and supported when they do have babies, and that women's fertility should be not just supported but explained to young women properly, so that they know that their fertility declines, and by the time they're 40 it may well be too late, so they can't really have it all, and they really shouldn't wait that long if they're wanting to have a family. But I do also realize that if we aren't reproducing in the West, and we're also bringing in a whole bunch of immigrants from the Middle East or whatever, then our Western culture is at risk of disappearing. It gave me an uncomfortable feeling, and I think that it's important for me to interrogate my automatic reactions to these kinds of things, because I've been trained in Marxism for my whole life up until recently, and feminism, of course, a certain brand of feminism. But I just thought I just worried that I was like, I don't want there to be a situation where women have to give birth for their country. Well, you have to, our country's at risk. So you have to have a baby. Like, it's not like I personally have never wanted kids. I don't want a baby. I know that most women do. That's fine. I don't want to be forced to have a baby against my will. I don't want other women who don't want to have babies be forced to against their will for the good of the country. So that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I think there are good reasons to worry. And again, historically, it's not good when the state starts pressuring women to have more babies. It's not a good thing. So how do you sit with all of this and try to come up with some kind of solution that doesn't require forced childbearing? It's true that women create humanity. Women make all the people, and women are the transmitters of culture. Women are the primary teachers of young children. And yeah, any culture will die out if women stop having babies at a replacement level. And if another culture that's in many ways diametrically opposed, even hostile to your culture, is moving in and you're not having babies, that won't have to work hard to destroy, to become the dominant culture and impose their own laws. So there's truth there. It's distressing to see a man like Tim Pool who, but I'm not sure. I know Zuby is also another childless man who likes to tell women how to behave and dictate this stuff, and has talked about the importance of women to have children. I don't know if Tim Pool has said this, but Zuby says again and again, he can't get involved with a woman because they're all gold diggers, right? Like, it's not fair that if he marries a woman and has kids and then she leaves him, she gets his assets. So these are not men who are family men, and they are role models for a lot of young men. And that's part of why we don't have men wanting to be supportive, kind, loving, dedicated to their women fathers. And that's a big reason women don't want to have kids, right? That
Has Zuby said that? I think I missed that. Oh,
Zuby has said that again and again, that he it's unfair that any woman that he married would have access to his wealth and power, which isn't, he could have a prenup, but even that is it's like not a very trusting way to start a relationship. I haven't seen any studies, but I bet that prenup marriages don't last as long as marriages based on mutual trust. Yeah, Zuby has said that, and he's aging. Like, he'll probably find some 20-something when he's like in his 50s or so, and have a family at that point, just when his clock starts to really tick, like a lot of these rich guys. But Tim Pool is the same way. Like, he doesn't have a great track record of modeling being a family man and supporting women and having children.
Yeah, I mean, I like Zuby, so I don't want to say anything negative about him because I'm not sure what his views are about all that. But I will say, and I don't dislike Tim Pool either, but I do, in general, I've heard this a lot from childless men in the sort of red pill internet sphere or heterodox or whatever, saying that, like, I think it's fine for us to talk about whatever. I'm joking. People can talk about whatever they want to. But I mean, we have talked about, and, I've learned this from other women like you, because I didn't used to have this view, because I didn't really understand the fact that women really should be thinking about having kids when they're in their 20s. And they shouldn't be waiting forever. And, they might deeply regret it. And it is important for women to become mothers and to reproduce. But, like, for men who are my age or a little bit younger than me, to be lecturing women about this while they're still childless and they're not married and they don't have families, and sort of like, okay, well, why aren't you contributing then? Right. I don't feel like I'm lecturing women and I'm saying you have to do this. I'm saying that women should be aware, because a lot of women really do believe, because they've been told, they believe that they can just wait indefinitely, or like, oh, I'll just freeze my eggs, and then when I'm 44, when I'm at the right place in my career and I'm financially stable, or maybe when I meet the right man, but also I can just do it alone, then I'll have kids, as though you can just produce a kid like that at 44, even if you have frozen your eggs. That's by no means a sure thing.
Well, totally. And we're not talking about all the horrors of that experiment, that we have no idea what it does to the DNA held in the eggs. The whole reason we have gametes is to pass on our DNA. That's how you make new people. What does it do to the DNA to hyperstimulate the ovaries and then extract all these eggs? The human egg is not supposed to exist outside the human body. And then to freeze them, like, what's gonna, like, these kids are gonna have problems. They already have problems. And then if you've waited to your 40s, you're probably not looking at gestating your own fertilized egg. You're looking at then hiring a surrogate and all of the ethical and crazy issues surrounding that, and also what's that going to do to your kid. It's nuts that that's presented as the solution for women, instead of how do we teach young people who know they want to be moms and dads to find each other when they are between like 18 and 25, and set up a mutually respectful, loving relationship and have their kids when they're young.
In a lot of ways, this is a man problem, not a woman problem, because I think most guys in their 20s don't want to settle down yet.
Right.
Like when I was in my 20s, and I think it's even worse now, men were not all that interested in commitment. I didn't know anybody who was getting married at that age, and that's not because the women that I knew didn't want to be in relationships or get married. Most women, I'm making a sweeping generalization, but this is based on me and most women that I've known. Like, most women, if they meet a guy and they love him, they want to be with him forever, in theory, at least, which means a marriage or some version of a marriage. And then they're waiting around for the guy to commit. So, we talk about this as though this is a woman problem. And I don't think it is entirely a woman problem. I mean, women can seek out husbands as much as they want, but if nobody wants to commit and marry, then there's not really anything that they can do about it.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, the incentive, and I'm sure there's a counter argument to this. I don't know what it is, but men would probably say, oh, well, like, what's the point? Why would a guy want to settle down? But wouldn't it be to start a family? Wouldn't, I feel like marriages are more beneficial in a lot of ways to men than they are to women. This was, another thing that I wanted to talk about this week, because I saw this video from this girl on TikTok. What was her name? The something edit. Hold on, I wrote it down somewhere. I should credit her. The YV edit on TikTok. But she was saying, we don't have to get into all of this right now necessarily, but she was saying essentially, like, men have set things up so that women feel like they have to marry a man, like they have to mate for life, whereas in most animal species, that's not the thing, because it's not necessary. It's not what the females want. It's not necessarily good for the females to have these male animals hanging around all the time. So it'll be like a mostly female community, and then there'll be a male or two for reproductive purposes, so that they can use his genetic material, and the females can all use that genetic material, I guess. But if you're part of a species where the males are violent and aggressive, and they aren't really contributing all that much to the community, and the females can take care of their community on their own, and there's no real reason to keep all these extra males around. Yet in our society, this is her argument, the concept of romantic love was invented so that women would believe that they had to find a man and mate for life, because they need somebody to provide for them, take care of them, whatever, so that they can have babies.
Yeah. I heard that, and I think there's truth in it. And I'm going to go metaphysical on this. And I'm thinking about Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, where she talks about creation myths and stories. And in her tradition, as an indigenous woman of North America, she says that the belief is that humans are the youngest species, and we were born without complete original instructions, right? Our instincts are less intact than the other animals, is what I view that as. And we can look to the animal world to know how to live. And that's what those are our elders, those are our mentors. So I heard that, and she's right that that's how elk behave, that's how lions behave. But I think as humans, we have free will. And I tell young people this, like, you decide what you want to be. Like, do you want to be a herd animal? Like the elk, do you, that's fine if that's your calling, but you could also be an eagle where they mate for life and are sexually egalitarian. And that's a cool thing to emulate. The wolves mate for life and are sexually egalitarian. And there's an alpha female ant, like there's an alpha pair that leads the pack. It's not following the alpha male around. All these women are like, I want an alpha. And they don't realize, like, the wolves that have an alpha, the female is also an alpha. She's not a beta to the alpha. That's just a BDSM.
Yeah, as if these animals are passive and timid and don't have to fight for their place and food and things like that also, right?
You could, so many of the birds have beautiful fatherhood traditions, like the sandhill cranes that live around where I am in the wintertime that I love so much. The dads are badass. Like, I saw this video of a male sandhill crane attacking a grizzly that was coming at the nest, and they mate for life. They get very sad if they lose their partner. Many of the birds mate for life. Coyotes mate for life. So you decide, like, you want to be a chicken? Do you want to be a chicken and, like, you get to be the puffed up rooster with a harem, like, or you want to be an eagle? I'm not interested in dating chickens. I'm not interested in dating herd animals. I'm more of an eagle or a wolf or a coyote or a crane. I want to find a man who that's also his spirit medicine. That's what he wants to emulate. But, we have a lot of people who, like the lions, these guys who are lions, not lambs. Like, lions are terrible fathers. They're terrible members of the pack. The females do all the work, and the males just lie around being muscle to scare off other males. But a lot of
you could argue that males are like that too. I mean, obviously not all individual males are like that. I know plenty of males who are good fathers and good partners, but there's, countless males now and throughout history who have just married and then ignored their wives and gone off and done whatever they want and gone to the bar and slept with prostitutes or whatever, and not done any, women sort of had to strong arm men into participating in childcare and in doing chores around the house and things like that. That's sort of a pretty recent thing. So yeah, I think arguably maybe the male human isn't wired to be a great husband or father.
I'm not sure. I think our species is a lot harder to pin down than most other species if you look at anthropology. And I think we do have free will. And I do think most people are herd animals. It disgusts me. It's like what we watched during COVID. Clearly, most people have the spirit of a herd animal, not of the animals that soar above or the animals that work it out. But I think we have choices, and I think that
that's what separates us from the animals, eh?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
The free will.
And I think it's true. Yeah. If you look at human history, that if the ruling class decides they want to increase the population, they either have to entice and convince women to have more babies through incentives, or they have to coerce women through violence to have more babies. And this is a time to talk about, like, I would prefer the carrot over the stick if we need to increase the population. I do want to say, what a weird
Yeah.
place to be in. That just seems like 5 minutes ago we were all concerned about overpopulation, and then suddenly we're all distressed that women aren't having any babies. Like that was a
Well,
rapid
women
shift.
are having babies. I mean, that's
Yeah.
sort of why this conversation confuses me a little bit, because I don't think that we are in danger of, not reproducing. Women are reproducing all the time. I think, I mean, yeah, I was thinking about that as well, because, so many women of our generation and the younger generations were told that the world is overpopulated, and so we needed to stop. Like, if there's anything you can do to save the planet, it's stop
Right.
reproducing. Which of course is
Exactly.
never going to happen because we're human beings. But it's what's happened in the West is that women have become independent, and we have had feminism
Mm-hmm.
for many decades now, and we can make choices and we can have careers, and we are arguably free, and that's led to women thinking, oh, maybe I want to do something else. Maybe I want my life to look like this, or maybe I only want one child and I'll just coddle them until they die. You don't need to have 10 kids because you know that 5 of them are going to die, and you need the
Right.
labor. So you need to have as many as possible to help you with the farm or the land or whatever.
Yeah.
So
There's so many vectors. This is such a multifactorial situation. I'm old enough to remember the equivalent of shotgun marriages, like you knocked her up, you're going to marry her. That was still happening when I was a kid. I knew plenty of people. That's how their families, that's how their parents got together. That doesn't exist anymore because of women's choices, right? Men are not held accountable to marry a woman. It's like, well, now you have to pay child support, which means also
right.
you get half custody. And then women are in this like reverse Solomon myth of you're raising the half baby, and that's not appealing. So a lot of women would rather end a pregnancy than end up in a lifelong shared custody arrangement with a guy they barely like, maybe don't even know. So there's so many things factoring into it. There's also honestly, the industrialization of birth has made birth this like pathological shit show of suffering for women almost all the time, and nobody wants to do it again,
And you have to sort of do birth isolated. There
yeah.
is no community of women around you for a lot of women in any case.
Well, for those of us who've had an undisturbed, unmedicalized birth, like that shit's addictive. Like I just remember after my first birth being like, oh, if I could go like give virtual birth, like once a year, that and not have to raise all the babies, that'd be amazing. Like no one's getting that innate rite of passage. It's less than 5% of the population of women who are getting the incredible psychoactive illumination of birth that makes you just think you're such a rock star. Instead, everyone's having these, life-threatening, painful, horrific experiences that are being manufactured by industrial birth, and that's what birth has become known as. So women don't want to do it again. You talk to 100 women who've birthed in the hospital, over 90% of them will tell you how she or her baby have almost died. Like then their milk doesn't come in, and breastfeeding is a disaster, and then they're all bummed out because they got pain and suffering, but they didn't get the euphoria of an unmedicated experience, and they're not bonded because their babies are whisked away. So nobody wants to do it again. It's like, oh, I'm never doing that again. Where I know as a midwife and a woman who's had undisturbed births, and the mother of a woman who's had undisturbed births, and a member of a community of women who've had undisturbed births, like many of us, if the social supports were in place, would have given birth 5 or 6 times, which women who are good at giving birth and want to have babies and want to be mothers should have 5, 6, 7 babies and be supported in that, rather than women all up in their heads who cognitively want a baby at 40 having just one. It creates a very different society.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, and I guess what I wonder, I mean, it's silly to talk about ideals, because I think that's really the whole problem with the left, and it was my whole problem as a leftist and a feminist, is that I was just imagining, a different, like a utopia, right? So we should be operating as though we live in this utopia that we don't live in. You're not operating in reality. You're thinking, well, if we were living in this perfect egalitarian community and it was like this and this and this, then this is how the laws and the policies should be. And we could just trust one another and nobody would do anything bad. And that's just not the reality. But I mean, at the same time, I do think that there have been so many cultures throughout history and throughout the world that, there were female-centric communities. And so it wasn't necessary to mate for life in the way that we do now, because you weren't just reliant on your husband to help and take care of you, and, that you were going to be totally lonely and isolated and not be able to take care of your kid or kids because there's nobody around to help and you need to work to pay for all this. And that's just not an ideal way to do things. So I think in some ways, this young woman's argument made sense. I mean, I do think that, romantic love exists outside of social norms. Like, I don't like romantic love just because I've been brainwashed by rom-coms, although I love a rom-com. But you get partly just swept up in all the chemicals of lust and sex and orgasms and attraction and things like that, and just connecting with someone in a way that you don't you don't connect with everybody in that way. So of course it feels very exciting, and for somebody to kind of devote themselves to you and to be your primary person or whatever, that is a very moving experience. At the same time, my experiences with men, I actually do think are pretty natural, which is that I go through phases of meeting a man and falling in love, and we're committed to each other, but after 2 or 3 years, it doesn't work, partly because I've chosen the wrong men and they're, abusive or narcissistic, or they have anger issues or addiction issues or whatever. But, partly also because you get to a certain point and you're lazy about having sex. But then, there's no real reason. You don't have to stay with somebody if you're not feeling it. Like if you don't feel like you love them anymore, or you're not happy, or you're not having a good time. The reason that you have to stay with somebody is if you have kids and you need help. And if that weren't a factor, one wonders. And there was sort of like a community of females around you, your family was around you. So, your mom, aunts, sisters, whatever, to help. So you weren't totally alone. What would be the point for women for mating for life? Like for men, there is a benefit because I think men have a different libido than women do. And it's helpful for them to have somebody to take care of them and to do the housework and to raise their kids. And because I think men get lonelier than women do. I think women are better at forming communities and maintaining friendships and having relationships and connecting in a lot of ways than men are. Like you hear about men, I think single men are a lot lonelier than single women are. I know a lot of older single women who are very happy and don't feel lonely at all, including myself. I mean, I don't consider myself older per se, but I don't feel lonely. I have like a rich social life and I have friends, and I've created my own life that makes me happy by following my heart's desires, which are unconventional. But I think a lot of men who are single are like really depressed and lonely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there's no ideal. You're right, there isn't, and there's so many different ways to do it. I remember reading all these books in intro anthropology classes in college and being so excited about different family structures, thinking if only we could do this. But you can't just like change your culture. Like cultural revolutions never go very well.
Right.
The reason that structure worked for so well for so long for whatever rainforest tribe you're reading about is that was their culture forever, and that their belief system is this is the way it's always been. So yeah, they have the men's house and the women's house, and the children live in the women's house until the boys are between 5 and 7. Then they go live in the men's house. And I think it's The Forest People, this great old anthropology book where there's such a division of labor and culture between the men and the women, and the tribal religion is only the men, and the women don't have access to that hut, and they don't get to listen to the magic flutes, and they don't get to play the magic flutes, and they don't take the psychedelics. And there's this line that says, the women seem to believe that as long as they own all the land and the children and the pigs, the men can have their magic flutes. And it's okay. And of course, I thought that sounded great. I would love to live in that society. I think that it would be great to get plugged into that. Obviously,
I mean, I love men and I love being around men. So to me, the idea of, like, just to be clear, like a manless world or society doesn't appeal to me at all. I don't want to only live among women, but I'm thinking in as far as, intimate relationships and mating for life goes.
That culture,
I love being friends with them.
According, yeah, I mean, of course they're interacting with the men, and they're not monogamous, and they believe that it's acceptable for a baby to have up to 5 fathers, but after that it's an abomination. They're clearly interacting with men, but they don't have this concept of lifelong monogamous pair bonding. Yeah, so I'm sure they have their own problems. But
I'm sure. I mean, like every society community does or whatever. Molly K in the comments says single men are choosing porn over mating, which I think might be true for, I think young men aren't dating and so obviously aren't in committed relationships with young women now because they're so hyper stimulated by the internet and online dating and pornography and, video games that also include pornography and on top of that, there are, many of them are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs and ADHD drugs, which I guess impact your libido. But, I think that does speak to a drive, which I think, men's primary drive would be sex and women's primary drive would be like a relationship or a partnership, because I think we've evolved in that way. Like you're trying to find somebody to stick around with you to take care of the baby until, I don't know, the baby can fend for itself or whatever.
Right.
But it's, I mean, I guess if there's no incentive for men to do that, I just wonder, like, where's the man's responsibility in this criticizing of women for not having enough babies?
Right. Well, and why they put the focus on women all the time.
Because then you can't be a single mom. It's like, okay, well then I guess women are gonna have to just get pregnant by these guys on their own, and then we're gonna have a bunch of single mothers, and those men are gonna have to support those mothers. Nope. Okay, that's bad too.
Yeah. I mean, people need to just really learn to be nicer and more loving and stop being such, selfish, terrible in relationship people, or it's not going to get solved. I would like to see these male influencers aim their talk at men. And for all of my critiques of much of what he says, I think Jordan Peterson does a good job of that. I think that he's the only one I know who's like, clean your room, like be good at personal grooming, get some skills that you can make money, get in shape, be healthy, and women will be attracted to you, and then find one and be a good father.
I think Tucker does that too. He really encourages men to get married and have kids young. Like find somebody, get married when you're in your early 20s and have lots of kids, and be a good husband and dad.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then they need to, exactly, just have a community. Tucker's he seems like a good family man as well. And so far, no horrible accusations about that. And even with Jordan Peterson, there haven't been accusations of adultery.
No, and surely things would have come out about both those guys. I think both of them are good guys and good husbands and fathers.
I agree. Yeah. I think if you know history, when we get to places like this in the historical timeline where civilization is not becoming more stable, things are destabilizing worldwide, there will be constraints placed on human behavior whenever things get bad enough that the rulers crack down on our behavior. And I do think that it's not going to be great for women. So I think it's good to have these conversations now to set up as many potentially happy relationships as possible. You could look at enduring cultures that have a tradition of monogamy, and one would be in Judaism, and looking at like, what is a marriage contract? How does this protect women? I think as feminists, we've been so indoctrinated in this idea that marriage is about women as property and doesn't respect women as autonomous beings. I'm not saying there aren't problems with Judaism, which literally is like the father of patriarchal belief systems and monotheism, but women are respected as the creators of Judaism and the creators of Jewish people. Like, if your mother is Jewish, you are Jewish. And the Jewish marriage contract, or the ketubah, is all about the man's responsibilities to the woman. And it says in there, he has to satisfy her sexually. He has to clothe her well. He has to provide a house that she's satisfied with. And if he breaks the contract, she and the children return to her family. Like, children are hers. And I think that, that's one way to do it. There are plenty of problems with, I'm not saying women are like super free within Orthodox Judaism, but that's a marriage contract that obviously evolved to protect the interest of women in terms of lifelong relationship commitments with men in order to stabilize the society.
I mean, I think now marriage does protect women more than it protects men, because women are in a situation where, I don't know. I mean, men have always been philanderers. Let's be honest. It's not the common thing for women to go out and sleep around, especially not in like a family type situation. Of course, some women have affairs, but it's very common for men to cheat despite being in a good relationship, and having kids, and the threat of divorce doesn't seem to be a thought process for a lot of men. I mean, men don't stop using pornography or sleeping with prostitutes because their wives find out or might find out. They keep doing it for the most part. They just hide it. You have to leave them. You have no choice, because they don't stop.
Yeah.
I don't think that men who are serial cheaters stop cheating. You just have to leave them.
I know there's so many sick and messed up people who will never be good partners. And probably, yeah.
There's so many, I mean, all of these conversations forget how many abusive, narcissistic, drunk, addicted men there are out there, and who've always been out there. And again, I'm not trying to vilify all men, but that's the reality. I mean, why would any woman want to stick around and be miserable, potentially, ruining her life, potentially ruining her kid's life with a man who was an alcoholic or an addict or violent or even verbally abusive, even like psychologically abusive, even just disrespectful, even just not present? Those things are traumatic, just as traumatic, if not more traumatic, than a frickin' divorce. The way people talk about a divorce like it's the worst thing in the world, without considering that a lot of relationships are like this, really toxic, and therefore toxic for the kids too. When you're in a toxic relationship, that's setting a standard for the kids. It's not just about you being selfish and you being like, I don't really like this, I'm leaving.
I've seen it both ways. I've seen a lot of people stay married who probably shouldn't, because kids are witnessing and normalizing abuse. I've seen a lot of people who got divorced because the women got sexually bored.
Well, all women get sexually bored in marriages. That's the other bad deal about marriage. Like, men still want to have sex with their wives. It's the wives who don't want to have sex after 10, 15, 20 years. That's usually how it goes.
I don't know if that's true. Just being a primary care provider, I have like all day long every day I hear women complaining that their husband's sex drives are so low, and that they they're not being satisfied. I don't know if that's the and and throughout human history, it has, the opinion of which sex has the higher sex drive has shifted. Like, I know Nietzsche complained that women were sexually insatiable and thought about sex all the time.
Yeah, for the first year, and then we get bored, and then we need somebody new to excite us again.
I think they're just all
It's
different
great
ways.
for the first year, maybe even the first couple of years. Then it's 4 times a day, and then after that, it's like, eh.
Yeah, a lot of people are addicted to that part of it and want that newness. Yeah. I don't know. I think that it's time to examine some of the cultural building blocks that we threw out and see what may be the good intention. Like, we could see the oppressive side, but what was the good intention? And I think of, the family used to have a big role in deciding who was an acceptable partner and mate, and
Right.
both males and females were strongly encouraged to look at someone's family structure and pick somebody from a stable, loving family. I mean, my dad used to always say all the time, you'll know someone's character by how they speak about their family and how their relationships with their family. So we're in a whole culture where a large percentage of the people of the age at which I think they should be having their first babies are divorced from their own families, not just the children of divorced parents, but they've canceled their grandma. They have nothing good to say about anyone, and they come from dysfunction. Yeah, I would recommend people who are from a healthy family not breed with somebody from an unhealthy family structure as often.
But then the people from unhealthy families don't get the opportunity to create healthy families. I mean, I think that it's good for a person to be vouched for. Like, this is one of the bad and scary things about online dating, about dating apps, is that you're meeting randos. You don't know any of their friends. You don't know their family. Like, nobody's going to tell you, oh, that guy was awful to his last girlfriend, or, that guy lies, or that guy's a serial philanderer, or that guy hangs out in strip clubs, or whatever. You just don't know anything. Like, this is why I feel like it's always best to meet men through people that might be through your family, might be through a church, it might be through parties or sports or university. Or I know people are always like, don't meet men in bars, but if you have a local and you have a community there, then I don't think that's a bad thing either. I mean, bars are where people hang out and socialize. But I do think it's good to look at people's family and think about how those patterns have shaped them, for sure, because of course they have. But then, I know really good guys who've come from really terrible family situations and left that being like, oh, I'm going to get sober and I'm never going to yell at my wife ever because my dad yelled at my mom all the time or yelled at me all the time.
And some of the most loving, stable families I know, young families, come from the most fucked up parents and made that decision, usually as teenagers or young adults, that they weren't going to repeat the patterns of their family.
Yeah.
So that's the flip side of that piece of advice. And that's why I had rejected it, as I'm like, that's just mean, that's not good, that writes off people. But to see what was the cultural preservation aspect of the old norms that we just threw out the window, and is there a way to bring that in that's not oppressive and coercive and that's actually practical for people? Because people are going to do what they do, no matter what I think about it. People are,
yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know. I mean, we're all coming from our own biases. That's, I think, the thing that often goes unacknowledged in all of these judgments and criticisms, which is, when I listen to people saying that, divorce is terrible and it's the worst thing in the world and it screwed me up, I think, okay, well, I feel like I would have been better off if my parents had divorced. And I know kids who I think would be better off if their parents had divorced and they hadn't grown up watching their dad treat their mother badly or mess them up or whatever. And, and it's also, I think, true that divorce has screwed a lot of kids up. And that, kids of single moms often have it really hard or in a dangerous situation because there are strange men coming in and out of the house,
Right.
because now they're dealing with like a boyfriend or a stepfather or something like that, which can be really dangerous for kids. But, males who are related can be really dangerous to kids too. Men
Totally.
can be dangerous. Like they can be violent, they can be sexual predators. Men who are related to the kids can, molest the kids as well, sadly and disturbingly. And, it's on women then, and that it's on men to make good choices, of course, but it's also, it's really on women to make good choices about who they're mating with and who they're marrying. Because it isn't just about them. It isn't just about how they feel and who they fall in love with. If you're planning on kids, you really have to think about all this quite differently, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have lots of great advice for other people.
And I think that our conversation just exemplifies how you can't codify anything, and there's always an example of how any piece of advice could turn into a disaster for someone.
Totally.
Yeah,
like get married young, marry your first boyfriend and have lots of kids could be really bad advice if that guy turns out to be a total loser.
Right.
Ollie K says it really needs to be a broader community around children. If it all comes down to mom and dad, that feels impossible. Worse these days than before. The isolation thing and the lack of community is a really big problem because there's no accountability process. Again, you're often meeting strangers. You don't know their friends and family. You don't know that situation. And I mean, I can just only imagine how scary it would feel to be a mom to a little kid or little kids and have the prospect of the dad taking off on you. That's a really, really hard life.
Mm-hmm. It is a hard life. And yeah, it is important to have community. That's been destroyed in so many places, and places that have, intact extended family and church structures also have abuse and coercion and control, even though it looks like there's a setup. Humans are awful.
I know. It's true because in small communities, it's like terrible things happen in small communities. And sometimes there's like great accountability because, I mean, when things happen in small communities, everybody knows about it. But sometimes the communities protect the predator or the abuser. When they don't, I think that's awesome. That's a great system when it works, but often it doesn't work. And then the woman is left hanging and everybody's defending the predator or protecting the predator. And, that happens a lot in small communities and religious communities, etc.
Right.
There was a question on Patreon that I wanted to read. If anyone has any questions or comments, please put them in the live chat. I thought it was interesting. I don't know if I have an answer, but you might, Mary Lou. So Chris says, I have a strange question. I've been wondering for a while what would happen if some virus came and wiped out everyone with a Y chromosome. I went down a rabbit hole years ago and found out so many Cairo labs haven't destroyed sperm since the beginning, as early as World War II, I think. It was thought to be a backup in case the man lost his life so his bloodline wouldn't end. Now, I don't know if this sperm is still viable, but my point is that we have a lot going unused. So let's say all the men who stockpiled sperm, let's say all the men are gone and women use the Cairo. Is that
cryo labs? Yeah.
Cryo. Okay. First it was spelled Cairo and now it's spelled cryobanks to try and repopulate. Male babies are born and not affected by the virus. They'd have no alive male role models, though. First of all, do you think women could keep the world going? And second, what kind of men would these boys grow up to be? Like, if all the men in the Middle East and third world countries were dead, obviously the violence would go down. But what is it that gives men bad traits? I know it's not all men, but like 98% of sex crimes are done by men. If these boys grew up without men, would they be as aggressive or violent as the men today? I understand the kids do better with positive male role models. I'm asking what would happen to us as a species if the male sex had to start over. Sorry for the wall of text. It's just a weird social experiment I've been curious about.
Well, obviously, there's no way to know, but you would have to factor in that you've got an incredibly traumatized female population. You know,
Right.
some women, a percentage of women will be happy that all the men have died off, but that's not the majority of women. The majority of women
No.
have male friends, loved ones, family members that they care about. So you have the incredibly traumatized, grieving
Well, you'd have
population.
lost a whole bunch of really important skills too. Like you would
Yeah,
have nobody doing all the hard labor and the hunting. I mean, obviously, women can learn to hunt and women could figure out how
totally.
to build a house and whatnot, but women are not cut out for
Yeah,
wars,
but we
things
know,
like that,
well,
and
there wouldn't be
protecting.
war. There wouldn't be war. I mean, that's
Right,
all
that's
about
true.
protecting from men. Like the when men are like, well, who will protect you? I'm like, from what? From like there won't be any men, so there won't be the need for that level of protection. World War II taught us that women can do anything industrially that men can do. All the men were sent away, or a huge percentage of the working age men were sent
Mhm.
away. Women stepped in and did everything, and that's a big that doesn't get credited as one of the major spurs of second wave feminism is women were pissed to find out they were absolutely capable of working in factories, working as plumbers, doing everything, and then they were
Oh, I
shoved
can
back
be
in. Oh,
independent. I'm just gonna go to work and take care of myself then.
yeah, and then they got shoved back into the housewife role, and those jobs were no longer they were forbidden from working many of those same jobs. So I think society would go on and be incredibly traumatized. You've also just lost half the population. And you have a lot of grieving women who've lost their male children. So, yeah, I think people are going to be pretty messed up and traumatized for a while. There's a chance that a large percentage of the women will be especially excited to have male children because they're excited that males are living, and you might end up with a more entitled male population
Oh,
that
right.
way.
Yeah, we'd have a bunch of little princes.
Yeah, you yeah, and you would come back to the place like most of human history that women that that a percentage of women up to 10% will die in their first pregnancy, or I don't think it's that high for maternal mortality, but women will not, about 10% won't want to, if the industrialization of birth is left. Though there are plenty of female obstetricians, there are plenty of female anesthesiologists, we probably would keep industrialized birth, so that wouldn't happen. So we'd still have these industrialized birth practices. So yeah, we wouldn't end up with that piece of like reverting to a more natural, like only the women who are naturally reproducing well without technology or making babies. That wouldn't change. Yeah, I don't know. We have lots of women who love tech. We have lots of women who are scientists. I think that yeah, in a couple of generations, we'd end up with a different society. But I don't think it would be a utopia. I think it'd be a pretty traumatized society.
Yeah, I think there would be all sorts of other problems that I can't necessarily predict in terms of a world without men. And then there would be, yeah, male babies being born who would be maybe super entitled and coddled. And I think boys do need male role models. They don't always model in the correct way, but men do understand men in a way that women don't, right?
Like adolescence would be interesting once that started, and how there's nobody to teach the boys to be good men, which is where we're at anyway. A huge thing, men are not showing up to initiate young boys into being a stand-up member of society who has control over their baser instincts. That's not happening already. So I'm not
No,
sure.
and I just feel I really don't want to be like so negative about men, but it's like, I mean, I guess now boys and teenage males are discovering porn on their own thanks to the internet, but I think they used to discover it through their fathers, through their male role models, because they would find their porn magazines, right? And then there was rituals for some men of like their fathers bringing them to a prostitute to lose their virginities. I knew guys like that in like the Greek community, for example, in Vancouver. You know, we've heard about other sort of men in various, you know, patriarchal or misogynist communities bringing their boys to a brothel to initiate them, which is a pretty horrible way to teach boys, you know, this is what sex is, like potentially kind of traumatic for the boy. Like, I don't know, that would be a weird experience, I would think.
I only know,
well, I'm not a boy, so
I know one man where that was his first sexual experience. His dad took him to a prostitute, and it was pretty traumatic for him. It wasn't something he bragged
you're like,
about. You know?
there's this strange woman that you don't like and you've never had sex before, but you're gonna have sex with her.
Yeah, that's pretty gross.
Weird.
Well, if this hypothetical happened and all the men and boys died and the women were using sperm from sperm banks to reproduce, you would have at least a 15-year hiatus of the sex trade, right? That like there would be, it's like 15 years with
I mean, women might be traumatized because so many of their loved ones died, but you would lose the trauma of abuse and sexual abuse for a certain generation, I guess.
Right. And you'd have at least one generation of girls coming of age and going through puberty without immediate, you know, that horrible recognition of I'm now susceptible to all this creepy male energy and afraid of being raped. That is the initiation into young womanhood for so many, you know, for most of us. So you'd have a very different entry, a different puberty for girls rather than now.
Yeah, it wouldn't all be centered around sexualization and like fear of your body changing because all of a sudden boys and men are treating you differently or trying to predate you or staring at you or being otherwise gross. Yeah.
Talking at your chest and making comments about your body. That would be a very different puberty for a whole generation of females on the planet. So you'd end up maybe with more egalitarian, you know, you wouldn't have boys perping on the girls in the same way. I think so much of that is learned. And I think that if you had all women running a society, you'd have a lot less bra snapping and upskirting and things like that going on with the teenagers. That, you know, there would be less of a, but who knows? You've got women who were raised in our society, half of whom or more are going to be boys will be boys. Maybe they'd be encouraging that in their sons.
Yeah, Molly says, but the boys and girls would be entering puberty together, and then says, I was more objectified by the boys my own age by the grown men. I mean, I think it was both. Like, I remember there being creepy men around and being creepy to the girls who were developing early, and the boys in my class making all sorts of comments and snapping bras and things like that of the girls who were developing. I was safe because I didn't develop breasts until I was like 16 or 17, which I hated.
Totally. I mean, I remember being 15 and, you know, being driven home by the dad of the family I was just babysitting for, and he's like pulling the car over and hitting on me, and it was just disgusting. And so it was like 11 o'clock at night, and luckily the guy wasn't a rapist. Luckily he was just a creep, like a run-of-the-mill creep, and not a rapist, and backed off when I said no. But and luckily I had a good dad and wasn't vulnerable to thinking that was cool, right? Like I had healthy adult male attention, so I wasn't attracted to this 40-year-old guy. You know, it's
It's funny because all of the you've I'm sure seen all of this rhetoric online about how like I think we maybe talked about this a bit last week, saying, it's natural for older guys like post 40, 50, 60 to only want 20-year-olds because they're the most fertile. And then women responding being like, young women are grossed out by you. Young women are not interested in, like, when I was 20, I thought that 25 was gross. Never mind 40.
Totally.
That's gross. Like, we think you're gross. And if a woman goes for you, it's because I think maybe there's some big age gap relationships that are healthy and normal. But I think for the most part, it's, there are girls who are gold diggers. There are girls who want like a sugar daddy. There are girls who want, who are like, sure, I'll have sex with you every once in a while and you can put me on private jets and buy me all this stuff. This seems like a great deal to me. Maybe I'll cash in one day. Often they don't. Often they get screwed and they're obviously replaced by a younger prostitute. But exactly. Or, they're women who are like messed up and seeking a father figure or easy prey for these kinds of guys who I think are primarily predatorial creeps and abusive because it's not normal for a 45-year-old man to be interested in a 23-year-old. But like, this is, like we're, most women are kind of inherently grossed out by these old guys. And I just don't know what they're thinking. Like, what would the father be thinking in hitting on you? Like, I guess some porny scenario.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. I mean, it's existed throughout human history. It's true, but I don't think it's healthy or good for women. Yeah, which segues into how upset I am about today's allegations against Neil Gaiman.
Okay, tell us about that, because you mentioned it to me, but I didn't get a chance to read about it at all. So what's happened with Neil Gaiman? Is that how you pronounce his last name? He's an author. I know that. What has he written?
He's one of my favorite authors. He wrote American Gods, which is one of my favorite American novels.
Okay.
Which I highly recommend. And he wrote he wrote a book called Trigger Warning of really good short stories. I've read multiple of his books and they're all great, but American Gods is really the best one. He's just an amazing author. He has always come across as like a champion of women. He married Amanda Palmer, who's a very interesting indie artist who has done a lot of cool things. And he was a bit older than her, but not too gross. Okay, someone said it's Gaiman, which is fine.
Gaiman, okay. I'm looking at this article that you sent right now, so continue.
So he and Amanda Palmer, they had 2 home births. They have these kids together. I think they were living in Australia with their 2 children. They're married, and they have a nanny because they're both working parents. And he had a relationship with the 23-year-old nanny when he was 60, which is so disgusting to me. Anytime, like Jude Law did that too. Anytime a man has sex with a nanny, I think it's so particularly disgusting and offensive.
It's such a horrible betrayal, beyond the fact that it's like you're getting off on this power dynamic that, she's obviously much younger than you and you're her boss, but you're doing this to this woman who you've employed, like that, that this woman and you have employed, that you're trusting. So she's trusting to be taking care of the kids.
Right.
And you're doing this behind her back and the kids. And it's so slimy.
It's universally slimy. And it's such a bad move. So he admits he had a sexual relationship with the nanny, and he's like, no, we just took baths together and had mutual.
While he was married to Amanda Palmer?
Yeah, he was married to Amanda Palmer while this was happening. Anyway, this woman who was, again, 23 at the time, and this is not that long ago, I think it was 2022. So Australia during COVID, like things were already nuts. I'm sure this woman didn't have a big social life either. And here's this wealthy, famous older man hitting on her, anyway, he admits they had a consensual relationship. She said that he assaulted her multiple times and coerced her into degrading, painful acts. I don't know if that's true or not. I think it's gross enough that he had sex with a nanny multiple times. He had a sexual relationship with the nanny. It's very disappointing. I still think his art is worthy of praise and consumption, but I think he has lost any respect as a human for me. That's so disgusting. He's like, I didn't rape anyone. I just had sex with a nanny.
That's how these conversations always go, right? Because they're like, now that we're post Me Too and we realize that a lot of this was exaggerated and not actually rape or serious abuse, then the response to all of these allegations is like, but he didn't abuse anybody or he didn't rape anybody or there's no proof. And I'm like, I don't care. This is still skeezy behavior. And now, it's like, okay, we don't need to cancel this guy or ruin his life, but I don't respect him anymore, I guess.
So gross. And then the other woman who came out with her accusation met him when she was 18 and he was in his 40s, met him at a book signing and had a sexual relationship with him. And she also says he was abusive and degrading. And he's like, oh, it was consensual. And she's 18. You're in your mid 40s. That's gross.
It was consensual.
And she's a groupie.
She consented to what, BDSM sex with you when she was 18? She'd probably had sex like maybe once or twice before. Like, how much sex can you have had at 18? Hopefully not very much. Hopefully not very much.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so disgusting. And yeah, I think that it would be, even if criminal acts occurred, I think it'd be almost impossible to prove it. And I don't want to live in a culture where people are convicted and incarcerated for accusations that can't be proven. But I think the guy's gross, and it's just disappointing. And it makes me, like you were saying, so many men are disgusting. Are most men just incapable of saying no to young female groupies? Are most famous men just like incapable of controlling themselves?
I think it's hard for men to say no. I do think that men's sexualities and men's libidos are they're just a lot different than women's. Like, I don't want to necessarily, like, I think that they are stronger in a lot of ways, but it's sort of, there is often this pattern, again, not always, there is often this pattern of, women wanting to have a lot of sex early on. Women can have multiple orgasms, so they can go and go and go. Men, sort of less so, but, I don't know that men sort of will continue wanting to have sex as women get bored later in life, but then they'll be re-excited when they meet someone new. I remember reading all this research about flibanserin when they were trying to push this female sexual dysfunction pill, the female Viagra. And so a lot of the research, I had an instructor, I had a professor who testified against that drug, and she wrote like an academic book on it. So a lot of her research was focused on that, and I did some graduate projects around that. And a lot of the research would say that, that women were, very, they had really high libidos, and then the libido went away. And sometimes it was due to relationship problems. Right. Sometimes maybe you just get kind of bored and lazy. But sometimes, maybe they aren't feeling respected by or cared for, they're not connecting with their partners, and so then you aren't feeling sexual or like having sex. But then magically the problem of female sexual dysfunction went away after they left this relationship and entered into a new relationship. But men, their sex drives, really are, women, it's not very common for women to go out and have sex with strangers. That is dysfunctional for women and less so for men. Like, it's not normal for women to just meet a random on the street and be like, sure, we can have sex. And that's not necessarily abnormal for men. I think that they're like sexual drives and their ability to have sex with people that they don't necessarily know or care about. And there's no threat to them either. You know, like having sex with a strange woman isn't a major, it's not a bodily threat to them. I mean, maybe they
Right,
might get an STI, but they don't seem that concerned about that. As far as I can tell, it's not usually the man who is like, hey, we should use a condom.
right, because there's a syphilis epidemic. Which there is, and horrifies me. Syphilis is through the roof right now. Nobody cares. And if it becomes resistant to penicillin, we are so screwed. But that's another conversation.
So I think, I mean, I think it is, maybe it's harder for men to say no to strange groupies and whatnot. I don't know that women get the same thrill would get the same thrill from, you know, young men throwing themselves.
Well, I think that there are a lot of hypersexual,
or whatever.
yeah, and there are women throwing themselves. But women throw themselves at rock stars, at famous men. Like there are a lot of hypersexual young women. There are a lot of women who wanna, they're like the starfucker phenomenon, right?
So they can brag about it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it might be sort of fun too, but I feel like that's a bit of a status thing for them, right?
And I have no issue with a man who bills himself as a player acting that way. Neil Gaiman was portraying himself as this wonderful male feminist family man who was there for his partner. Like that's,
well, he's married. He's in a committed relationship, you know.
Exactly.
Like I don't, yeah, fine. If you're single, you can have sex with who you want to have sex with. But
and it's still creepy. It's, in my opinion, if like you're a single dad and you're having sex with a 23-year-old nanny and you're in your 60s, I think that's gross and exploitive. And even if she's throwing herself at you, you say no. But yeah, it's so disappointing. Just like,
I mean, men can say no. I know lots of men, you know, young attractive men who have girls throwing themselves at them, who are not sleeping with all of them and who are looking for, you know, a girlfriend and partner. Like it is a values thing and it is a choice thing. It may well be harder for men to say no. They are getting obviously turned on faster and easier than women are. I think for a lot of women, there's more of a mind-body connection. Baron in the comments says, Megan and Mary Lou, let's hear your wish list for men. I want them to stop watching pornography. That would probably be my number one. Don't hit women or choke them. That's a good one.
I agree with both of those.
I chose the easy one, sorry.
I also would like to see an end to video game addiction. I think it's incredibly destructive to so many young men to be addicted to video games and to stay up all night gaming. I think it wrecks their physiology and their mental health and their ability to be good participants in society. And a lot of the video games are pretty pornographic too. So
I think it's just such a waste of time. I think it's such a waste of your brain and time and energy and life when you could be outside or doing something productive or learning a skill or like being creative. Like there's so many other things that you could do that would be healthier in a variety of ways. Oh, Baron says something positive. He didn't want us to just say what we wanted men not to do. What do you want from men? I mean, that is positive for me. I think that it would be better for men and women if men stopped watching pornography. We would have much better relationships. I think men would be probably healthier and happier in the long run, maybe not in the short term, but
I would like to see a return to chivalry and for men to be kind and to view it as the highest honor to be a family man in service to a woman and children. If they want to have children, I'd like to see a return to chivalry with that.
chivalry.
Yeah, I think chivalry is great. I think that think that's sad that men are like, well, if we don't get to be in charge of everything and you all want to be independent, we're gonna stop being nice and chivalrous. We're just gonna
But I
find
think
you.
there still are lots of chivalrous men in the world. I think that's BS when people, and I think it's often men who are saying this. So I don't know why men are saying such negative things about their brethren, but who are saying, well, yeah, why should we do anything for you? But I think that in large part the men that I meet out in the world are chivalrous and hold the door for me, and if I need help carrying my luggage up the stairs, they help me and offer to fix things and take
Right.
care of me if I need help and so on and so forth.
And to give up their seat for a pregnant woman or an elderly woman or a man who is infirm as well, like to be of service to their community. I do believe men and women can be friends, and I think a good marriage is based on mutual respect and friendship. And I would like to see men and women both give up this narrative of the war between the sexes, because it's just going to be the end of our species if we can't stop fighting each other all the time, and to view women as equals isn't the right thing, but it's full human beings that are worthy of respect and that you can connect with more than just sexually.
Yeah, and I think that's like a thing that's changing for the good in modern times, because I think men and women can be friends. I mean, yes, of course, there's going to sometimes be a sexual tension, but that can also disappear. Like a lot of my friendships with men are men where we kind of liked each other and maybe almost dated at first, and it didn't work out for whatever reason, or the timing was off, or it just didn't happen, and then we just became friends. And that doesn't necessarily hang and linger indefinitely. Like you can friend zone each other, as it were, and just have like a normal, nice friendship with men in all sorts of different contexts. And yeah, and I do think that it is sort of wise to think about your marriage and your long-term partnership as a friendship. I think that's the thing that would probably make for a long-lasting, lifelong marriage, is if you guys were actually friends and had a mutual respect for one another and enjoyed spending time together. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's ideal to be good friends with your partner, and that doesn't mean I think you should get all of your emotional needs met. And I do think both men and women need other relationships than their primary sexual bonding relationship if they're in heterosexual relationships. Other things I would like from men. I would like for men to stop raping and to do their best to get other men to stop being sexually violent. That's a negative as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I mean, the things that I can think of that I want from men, I feel like I get, like I said earlier, like I get a lot of good things from my friendships with men. Like the men that I'm friends with are super helpful and supportive and kind and respectful. Sometimes even if I don't think they're great boyfriends or partners, to be honest. So that's sort of why I'm pro being friends with men. And I think being friends with men will give you a better and different impression of men than if you're just dating them, which might make you very cynical. Like if you're only dating men or sleeping with men or in intimate relationships with men, I think it would be sometimes a lot easier to end up with a really negative view of men, because unfortunately a lot of men are not great as partners or boyfriends or dates. They aren't, protective of your emotions necessarily.
What are there other questions? Fascinating. Other sci-fi questions?
I am not seeing any other questions. If anybody has any questions, ask them now or forever hold your peace. Someone mentioned my shirt earlier. Thank you for mentioning it. It says Team Turf And you can purchase it on my store at Fourth Wall. And the link I will put in the live chat on YouTube. It's also in the show notes on YouTube, or it's the same drugs shop at fourthwall.com. Oh, you Push-Ups had a super chat question that I missed. I'm so sorry. Thank you for letting me know. Oh, okay. Who would be the boys' role models? Oh, this must have been from our sci-fi scenario where all the Y chromosomes died. I think we did talk about that a bit. I mean, the boys' role models would be the women. So,
but it wouldn't just be the women. It would be the women telling stories of the good men that they had known in the past. So, I mean, ideally, it would be women mentioning, telling heroic stories. The way we've always passed down culture in about things that we can't actually have a material example of. There would be stories of great men, and hopefully they would be men with good behavior that had been really wonderful men for all of society, including women and children, not just great men, men's men who are guys. I think that there would obviously still be technology and many examples of pop culture. This is where there still probably would be pornography if the internet is still up, right? I don't know if the women would strip.
oh, right.
Yeah.
We would have to get rid of the internet.
Yeah. Let's go back to DVDs
and have to strip the internet. I mean, maybe if all the men were gone, the women wouldn't know how to run the internet anymore, and it would just disappear on its own. Because women wouldn't know how to learn to code. Who would they learn from?
Yeah, exactly.
There would be no Elon Musks to run Twitter. There would be no men to run Pornhub. Maybe the women would take that up and become sickos themselves, but I sort of doubt it. I mean,
I think they could absolutely do the coding. I think they absolutely can run companies. I don't know. I would hope there aren't enough women who want to keep the porn industry going. There wouldn't be a demand.
There wouldn't really be an incentive. There would be no demand, and you wouldn't be able to make new porn. It would have to be AI porn, and then who would you be making it for? Because it wouldn't be for the women. It would be for the boys, and you'd be waiting a whole generation. So in the meantime, I feel like it would kind of just die off. You're waiting 15 years stockpiling AI porn for when, that doesn't seem like something that women would bother to do.
Yeah.
Charlie says the world would be overrun with spiders. I'm not bothered by spiders, and I live in Mexico, so I've had to kill all sorts of terrible things by myself, which I do not enjoy, but I have had to do it so I can do it. The scorpions and cockroaches I don't make a habit of killing spiders, but yes, if there's a scary spider, of course I'll kill it. Bees, the lizards I keep.
I think a lot of that female reactive squeamishness is a learned mating response behavior to
oh yeah, if you have to do it yourself, you do it yourself, and then you can do it. That's just how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. I think if there's no man that come save me, there's no need to perform the damsel in distress. It's I just got to deal with it.
Yeah.
And there's some creepy bugs that I'd prefer someone else deal with, but I can deal with it if no one else is around.
Yeah. I don't love it, but I will.
Like centipedes, that's the one I really can't stand. But I've had to deal with them. I mean, I just really hate centipedes. Do you have those down there?
I'm sure we do. I am trying to think if I've had to kill. There was little tiny centipede things. I don't know what they're called that I used to have a bunch of in my old place, but they weren't scary ones. The scariest things have been the scorpions. I really, really don't like those.
Right.
And then sometimes big crawly spider. I think I saw a little tarantula outside my house once. It freaked me out. BJ says, Megan, do you think Andrew Tate is a bad role model for young men today? First of all, I don't think Andrew Tate is a real person.
Interesting.
I just don't buy it. Like, this is all so fake. Like, this is not a genuine life or personality. Like, whoever Andrew Tate is, I don't think it's who he is on Twitter or, you know, on the internet. I think he might be gay. I think that he's a huge freaking dork. Like, I think he only appeals to 13-year-old boys who don't know what the real world is like, because they're like, look, he has this cool car and he's so cool and tough, and look at all his stuff. That man, I can't remember the name of his account, who does all the male fashion threads. I really love him. He recently did a thread comparing the fashions of alpha males to little dog fashion. That was a good thread. I should have sent that to you. I'm sorry that I didn't. I'll try to find it for you. But he pointed out in that thread that this like Gucci robe that Andrew Tate was wearing was probably fake, because the fabric on the pocket didn't line up with the fabric on the rest of the robe. And if it were genuinely Gucci or whatever, you know, like super high-end designer, they pay attention to those details so that the pocket lining lines up and is not mismatched with the rest of the fabric on the robe. So, you know, he was faking that. But also, I mean, I guess he apparently did, if this is true, run, you know, he was pimping out women on OnlyFans. He was making money off of pimping out women. So he's a horrifically unethical person. And that's sort of his big claim to fame, tough guy thing. Like, I got rich managing this stable of women. So either way, he's a terrible person, because he's either a total phony and he's just invented this persona to get rich, and everybody is supporting him in doing so, including Candace Owens and Elon Musk, and even Tucker Carlson had him on. Very disappointing. Like, why are you talking to this loser? This, like, come on, stop legitimizing him. Yeah, or he's, you know, an abusive misogynist.
So no, not a good role model.
No. I can't believe that he's a real person. It's just so hard for me to buy that any of that is real. It's just so over the top and silly and stupid, and, you know, exactly what the deluded fantasy of some young boy would be.
Yeah. I probably need to take off. It is night. Okay. Yeah. And we're not here next week, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Next week, I am going to Tijuana to get a stem cell treatment. Exciting. My knee is going to be perfect. I got a stem cell treatment in my knee, you'll probably recall, last fall. And it's so much better. Like, it's not in pain anymore. I used to like hurt when I walked down the stairs, kind of thing. And it's a lot better now. It's probably better. Like, it's better at the gym too. I used to have to ice it literally every single time I got home from the gym. It would be so swollen. So I think it's stronger from doing like deadlifts and squats and kind of more like leg work. So that probably helped, but definitely the stem cell treatment helped. But it's still a little bit, I think it could be a bit better. So I'm going to do another treatment, and then I'm going to have the knee of a 17-year-old girl. It's going to be the sexiest knee that a 44-year-old ever had. I'm joking. It probably won't look any different. It'll still look like my knee. But yes, we won't be here next week. I've never been to Tijuana either, so that might be interesting.
That'll be exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be cool.
I will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you all not next week, but the week after. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Mary Lou's website is enchantedfamilymedicine.com. You still have like a menopause workshop coming up, right?
Right. It's coming up on Saturday. And this Saturday, you can still sign up. And you don't have to be there in real time. It'll be videoed and you'll get the material if you want to get the information later. Yeah, please sign up for my menopause class.
Okay, cool. And she's also on Substack. You can subscribe. She's at Mary Lou Singleton. And I am, of course, at meganmurphy.ca. I've been slowly getting the audio from all these streams up on Spotify and on my Substack under Where Are All the Women in both places. I'm about 2 weeks behind. I've been trying to catch up, and I will still keep trying. But yeah, if you miss this and you want to listen somewhere that's not YouTube, I have been putting those up in podcast form, like very, very, very minimally edited because I don't have time to do much more than what I'm doing now. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. This was a really good time. And go men.
Go men.
After all that male bashing. Love ya.
Yeah, I'm going to go home to my loving husband.
Yeah. I'm going to kiss my dog.
Perfect.
Okay. Bye, everyone.